I think for me, first and foremost, when you're creating your practice and your brand, you have to have that brand clarity, and it really needs to be translatable into replicating into multiple offices.
You have to make a decision at some point when you're ready to expand, and making sure your first location is achieving and reaching capacity. The most telling thing is, are you driving revenue? And top line is important, but then you also want to make sure that you're managing bottom line very, very well.
We want to look at things like leases and vendor agreements and employment agreements and professional services agreements, and all these things that may have, some sort of restriction or limitation or anything like that. And just make sure that even if all the other pieces are in place, we're not accidentally shooting ourselves in the foot with something that could be otherwise easily avoided by just knowing what your contract said.
But at the point in time that you want to scale, you need to have a seamless process. Part of that seamless process is making sure that you have certain softwares, everything from POS, EMR system, having, if you're doing blood work and things with your patients, having a system where it all ties in together, right?
Welcome to the Business of Aesthetics Expert Panel Webinar. This empowering discussion will help you navigate challenges, leverage opportunities, and build a thriving career in aesthetics. Thank you for joining us and our panel of renowned industry leaders as they share actionable strategies, best practices, and certainly valuable insights to tackle the unique leadership challenges faced by aesthetic professionals today. Welcome to our panelists for this webinar. With us, we have Paula Brezavscek, we have Sameal Tejada, Randolph Stepp, and Samuel Pondrom. Great to have all four of you with us. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And today, with our Business of Aesthetics Expert panel, we're going to be discussing navigating growth and challenges, scaling to a second or third med spa location. Boy, if this is in your wheelhouse, you're thinking about growing, this is like an incredible gift with the knowledge that we'll have to be able to help set you up for success with that. And if it's immediate, that's awesome. If it's planned, but at the end of the day, the information we will gain here, I'm sure, will set us up for success in each of our practices. But before we dive in, I want to just ask you this. When potential patients in your area search for treatments you offer, does your practice actually show up, or are they finding your competitors instead? This is a major challenge for many aesthetic practice owners. You might be offering amazing services, but if you're not visible online, you're missing out on a steady stream of new patients. The good news? There's a fix. There really is. There's a really good fix as well. With the right digital marketing strategy, covering local SEO, targeted ads, and funnel-based content marketing, you can not only attract more inquiries, but convert them into actual patients walking through your doors. And here's the very best part. If you stick around to the end, I really hope you do, and I think you will, because this is going to be just so jam-packed with great stuff for you. But if you stick around to the end, there is a gift that we have for you, something very special that will speak to this opportunity, something that can help take your practice's online presence to a whole new level. So if that is of interest to you, you want to stay with me, and I'll make sure we get you hooked up with that. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to introduce our panelists. I'm going to start off with myself. My name is Michael Walker. As a leadership coach, professional mediator, facilitator, I'm passionate about helping set leaders and their teams up for success that matters, helping them lead themselves well so they can lead others well. The focus on communication, conflict, and change, my team and I at Capstone Coaching help unlock and engage the full potential of an organization and its people. Our first panelist tonight is Paula Brezavscek. Paula is the CEO and founder of Azala Skin Clinic, is a board-certified physician assistant with degrees from Cornell University and Barry University. Inspired by her battle with adult acne, Paula brings deep empathy and artistry to aesthetic medicine. At Azala, she fosters a safe, pressure-free environment where patients feel heard and empowered. Her approach blends technical expertise with a passion for natural beauty, emphasizing individualized care and confidence building. Paula is committed to creating honest, lasting relationships through cosmetic dermatology, helping patients feel like the best version of themselves while honoring their unique features and personal wellness journeys. It is great to have you with us, Paula. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
Our second panelist is Sameal Tejada. Sam is the visionary founder and CEO of Liquivida, a premier wellness center focused on proactive health. From his beginnings as a firefighter and paramedic to building a nationally recognized brand, Sam brings real-world expertise in scaling operations, leading teams, and navigating financial growth. As the author of How to Win in Modern Wellness and chairman of the Leadership Advisory Board for the American IV Association, Sam is a dynamic and respected voice in the wellness industry. On his podcast, A Healthy Point of View, Sam engages with top experts, thought leaders, offering powerful insights for health-focused entrepreneurs ready to expand their footprint. Welcome. It is great to have you with us, Sameal.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Our third panelist is Randolph Stepp. Randy is a seasoned growth strategist and franchise executive with 20+ years of experience scaling businesses across healthcare, retail, and the public sector. As CEO of VIO Franchise Group, he led a $1 million med spa into a $34 million valued franchise, delivering 25% EBITDA margins. Kind of like that. At Apex, he drove national growth for diverse brands, leveraging scalable systems and franchise expertise. Now leading Bar Aesthetics, Randy guides medical aesthetics practices and private equity firms, through expansion and mergers and acquisitions. With an ED and MBA and EOS, he specializes in sustainable, high-impact business growth. Great to have you with us, Randolph.
Good to be here.
And our fourth panelist is Sameal Pondrom. Samuel, after graduating from Oklahoma State University, began his career as an accountant for 2 engineering news record top 40 construction firms, sharpening his skills in analyzing complex problems and delivering clear and concise solutions. Leveraging this expertise, he now partners with clients to address intricate business and healthcare regulatory issues in a straightforward manner. Sam is a sought-after speaker at medical conferences nationwide, educating doctors and providers on diverse business of medicine topics. He also trains attorneys in healthcare law through accredited and non-accredited continued education courses. And Sam earned his JD from Southern Methodist University, Dedman School of Law, and his BS from Oklahoma State University. Wonderful to have you with us as well, Samuel.
Thanks, Michael. Happy to be here.
Now you'll see on your screen the main points for today's discussion that I'm confident will help deliver an amazing and insightful webinar. We also have some great questions lined up for our panel today, and I'm looking forward to just hearing where they're going to take us and the best practices they're going to reveal to us. And I think we're going to hear a lot about passion as well. So I would encourage you to connect. This is a live event, so I would encourage you to connect with us through chat. If you have a question for one of the panelists, go ahead and throw it up in the chat or the Q&A. And we will grab the question, we will pose it back to one of the panelists. If for some reason it comes in late or we don't have time, I can tell you that Whitney, our webinar manager, she will make sure she grabs any questions we don't answer, circles back around to our panelists and gets an answer and makes sure we get that back to you. So no question hits the floor, nothing gets lost in the shuffle, if you will. So please feel free to reach out, even just a comment. You don't have to necessarily have a question, just comment on what you're hearing. We love to make this as interactive as possible. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we're going to get right into the questions now. And the first question I have is for Paula. Paula, the question I have for you is, as a successful CEO who has grown your clinic, what financial, operational, and staffing benchmarks did you use to determine when your practice was ready to scale? What a great question. And what were the early signs that you were on the right track? Even a better question.
Yes. So I think for me, first and foremost, when you're creating your practice and your brand, you have to have that brand clarity, and it really needs to be translatable into replicating into multiple offices. So that was very, very important. For me, being a small operation, I started with a small team, making sure we had at least 3 to 6 months of financial overhead to cover any margins for those salaries. And it just gave us a little bit more confidence to slowly start expanding. As a new business owner, investing all of that profit into the newer devices, I think building that business line of credit so that, you can have that liquidity in some of your cash, and negotiating a lot with your vendors so you can keep building. And it really wasn't until I had my operational staff on board, a strong manager that was going to be able to oversee the practice, so that I was able to start focusing on a different practice, making sure that I would have the providers that I would trust in order to expand into the new next location, and specifically providers that had leadership qualities as well, so that they would be able to oversee a new office as we build. And really, most importantly, is that we were at capacity within our technology. All of our rooms are being utilized to the max, and there was no more growth within my current practice. So that for me was a very clear case where I had room to grow and expand into a next location. Ideally, I did think about this ahead of time, so I would hire and recruit injectors or providers in my practice that would be able to be in this new location. So my new practice is half an hour away, so it's not that far. It kind of allows for everyone, manager, myself, a little bit more oversight as we grow, since I'm a small business owner. So pretty much the operational benchmark is growing to capacity, not a lot of turnover of my patients, booked out months in advance, and just knowing that that demand is growing and utilizing all your platforms for marketing and starting your marketing early, I think is important.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, that I heard right at the top of your cash flow. There's nothing worse than trying to grow and be behind the 8 ball right out of the gate. I mean, I've expanded. I've had I sold to an American a couple of years ago, my coaching company. We had offices all through Canada, United States, but we started. I remember just being my advisor saying, to your point, having 4 months in the bank to be able to cover, so that we didn't have to depend on a dollar coming into the operation, so we could focus on the partners, the stakeholders, the actual marketing strategies. And let me say, there's nothing there's absolutely, there aren't really no surprises in expansion unless you choose to ignore something. And that's what I heard you say.
Yeah, foresee any caveats.
Yeah. Thank you, Paula. The next question I have is for Sameal. And as someone who transitioned from being a firefighter, you knew where you're going in this neighborhood. You can't have that in your resume and not get this question. As someone who transitioned from being a firefighter and paramedic to building Liquivida into a nationally recognized brand, what specific criteria did you use to evaluate if your business was ready to scale, both from an operational and financial perspective?
So thank you, Michael. My stories are pretty interesting. So, I started Liquivida on my days off from the fire department, and I started the company with $500 in my back pocket, and I haven't taken a penny from anyone up till today. And we're a nationally recognized company with locations throughout the nation. And, we've been bootstrapped since day one. And I tell people, if you're going to be in growth mode, you can always be bootstrapped, right? Because growth mode never stops. You can go from growing your business countywide, statewide, nationwide. You can keep on growing and go global, right? So for us, the first part on the operational side is, number one, do your employees and your team members, and including some of your partners that are working through sweat equity, because you can only imagine starting a company with $500 in your back pocket. I had to get a lot of people to do some work for free, right? So I had to really express my vision to others, right? Attorneys, accounting, chief medical officer, where people said, you know what, this vision makes sense. I'm going to go ahead and roll up my sleeves and go to work with Sameal Tejada. So, and that's how Liquivita came to fruition. Now, when it comes to your team, your employees on the operational side, they have to understand your vision, right? They have to understand your vision and want to be part of that growth and understand that they're truly going to be part of the team and experience some of those benefits that you're going to experience throughout that growth process as well. Operationally, when it came to the point of us thinking about having multi-locations, the first thing, especially with my background as a firefighter paramedic, was, are things going to flow smoothly just like the way they do at the one store that we have, right? How do we make that happen? Well, in the fire department, we're really big into SOPs, standard operating procedures. So, and I remember when we first started putting that SOP manual together, it was like as thick as a magazine. You look at it today, it's thicker than the Bible. So having those SOPs in place to make sure that your business flows smoothly in every single location and it mirrors the location you have, to me, that's part of one of the most important parts. You know, it's systems and processes. Having one location is significantly different than having 2, 3, 4, 5, and up to 20 locations. You know, when you have one location, you can kind of get away with having multiple operating systems that don't communicate to each other. Everyone kind of knows what they have to do at the clinic. But at the point in time that you want to scale, you need to have a seamless process. Part of that seamless process is making sure that you have certain softwares, you know, everything from POS, EMR system, having, if you're doing blood work and things with your patients, having a system where it all ties in together, right? I'm an individual who loves to grow business based off of data. I scale off of data. The only way to have true quantifiable data is by having these systems, processes, and these different tools in place so you can actually have that quantifiable data and scale based off of that. So, you know, financially on that side, when you asked the question of how did I know if I was financially ready or what did I do to prepare financially? You know, on that end, again, we've been bootstrapped since day one. So one of the things that we focused on scaling to multi-locations is incentivizing our team to hit certain milestones when it came to revenue with the new locations, right? So we're all in it together. Even if the team members are not actual partners, equity partners, you know, we're treating them as partners as we're scaling.
Thank you, Sam. And I love the bootstrap analogy, using that. Of course, that it's really nice if you know, you have love money that can just suddenly drop in and set you up for success financially. But when it's bootstrap, it's a game changer in terms of how people gravitate towards the vision, as you were talking about that. You know, I was thinking the continuity of your stores is led by the consistent delivery of your vision. And then what I heard you say, it's advanced by the standard operating procedures, the continuity of systems. But I've noticed in a lot of companies, they forget, they get they start to just focus on the SOPs and the execution, what they do and how they do it. They forget to keep that focus on the vision of who they are and why they matter. And I've noticed in a lot of organizations, when that starts happening, you start having one of the ships leaving the mothership. And it's about consistency, continuity, and keeping a focus. I like to say vision leaks every 30 days. So it's got to be repeated, got to be communicated. Thank you, Sam. Randolph, you led the development of a single unit med spa that was performing below industry average. You transformed it into a successful proof of concept that became a multi-unit national franchise brand. Can you walk us through the 2 or 3 most critical changes you made to turn that business around and how you knew it was working?
So I heard a couple things already today that, you know, I can echo completely. One is, you know, being bootstrapped. When we launched, we were bootstrapped for sure. And the other one being get your first location to maximum capacity, humming well, doing very well before you ever decide to go to the second location. Because once you go to that second location, that'll probably be the most difficult transition you make from 1 to 2, because you're doubling your size, right? It's the only time you're going to do that. And to echo what Sam also said, is to create these systems and processes and document them and make sure that people understand your vision, where you're headed, why you're headed there, and that they understand every step in the process so you can replicate it over and over and over again. So for us, we had to first make sure we had the right people in the right seats. There's a couple of books that I'm going to recommend you read if you're thinking about scaling. One is Good to Great. It's an older book. I say older now. When I first read it, I was just like, this is amazing. And then one that really mirrors it a lot is called Traction. And so when we were launching, we really had to figure out if we had the right people in the right seats, and that they were aligned to our core values, our vision, and making sure that they could execute on those systems and processes that we were putting in place. And then we had to figure out the right service and product mix. When I look at med spas today, wellness is coming in, and everybody's trying to be everything to everyone, and they have lost their identity in some cases. And people want to know that they're coming to a especially a medical practice, and med spas are medical practices. They're coming to a business where there's experts that know what they're doing. When they're going to Liquid Vita, they want to know these guys know what they're doing when it comes to IVs, that they understand the nutraceuticals, and they understand the effects, and they understand the contraindications, and they understand kind of what's happening. And I'm sitting here in Texas, and I know Sam is in Texas because Sam and I work together on occasion. And there's been some things happen in Texas, especially when it comes to what Sam does with Liquid Vita and IVs, and people have lost their lives, unfortunately, because of people who are doing things that they shouldn't have been doing in the first place. So they want to know that you're an expert and that you can do what you got to do. So having the right service products mix that's aligned to your core values, making sure that you have a business operating system that drives decision making. I love that Sam says, I use data. Data drives decisions. Heck yeah, that's really how you're going to grow your business, is understanding your data inside and out, and using that data to help you make good decisions. And then having a culture of execution and accountability. And so when we were building this from the start, we really focused in those areas before we launched as a franchise brand.
Thank you, man. If I heard you say, talk about core values, having that right service mix, having the business platform established, having the data well aligned, and not just data for the sake of data, but data that actually you're dashboarding that can transform how you see what's going on in the business. And then ultimately, I think when you kind of bring that right down, that there's a saying, that you can look at acceleration, which is about how fast you want to hit the wall, or you can look at momentum, which is about how far do you want to move it. And acceleration is unplanned expansion, and it can hurt. But momentum is planned expansion, and it takes work. And as for our listeners, there's a lot of things you're hearing. Remember, you're hearing a lot of stuff. Try and grab some key points. You're going to be able to access these folks. So this is not a one-time thing. Don't get, because there's a lot of good data coming down for you. Speaking of data, but I just want to encourage you to just capture things. You're going to be able to watch it again, but capture the things that are significant to you, that you think that's the place that I could start from. And I think we're going to get more into that when we get further into the questions. But the next question I have is for you guys. Are just really trying to confuse me with Sam and Sam tonight, but that's okay. I think I can work my way through. Samuel, with your expertise in healthcare law and business regulation, what legal or regulatory considerations should healthcare providers keep in mind when assessing whether they're ready to expand to additional locations?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I will say I have to very much echo one of the things Paula said, is we get people who come in all the time, and their initial goal is 5 locations or whatever it is. And I'm a big fan of let's get one in place, let's get revenue flowing, and let's get it right, and then we can look at it. And so the question becomes, from our perspective, what does let's get it right mean? And, that's always my primary question when people are looking at any kind of expansion, whether it's, internal or external, is your house in order? Have you done the things you need to do? And so what do we look at? First and foremost, structure, of course. We want to make sure that the structure is where it needs to be, both in terms of state law compliance, but also efficiency. There's a lot of times we'll see where people have kind of come in and it's built organically, and you end up with duplication and sort of these redundant systems that aren't really needed. And so from a legal standpoint, yes, we want compliance, but we also want to make sure that you're able to do things you want to do. So starting with that legal structure is the always the first question. The very next place we look is practice of medicine / patient flow. And, it probably seems like kind of a, obvious question when we're talking about a med spa, but we do have to be careful about what services we're offering, what those services are quantified as or characterized as, and what that means for us from a regulatory perspective. And a lot of times we'll get people who are, convinced of something, that these are aesthetic, these are medical, whatever. And we really have to, parse the lines of service and make sure that we have properly characterized each of them, and that for each of them we have appropriate patient flow, that we're respecting the laws of an individual state. And which leads me into another point that I'll touch on in a second. But then once we cross state lines, what does that look like? The third major pillar that we always look at when we're looking at, is your house in order? Are you in a legally compliant place to expand? Is delegation and supervision. We want to ensure that you have the right people and the right places, and that to the extent they need collaboration or supervision or whatever it is, you also have the right people in those roles. And so, for example, one of the things that we always look for is what we call overlapping scopes of practice, meaning that both the person receiving the delegation and the person delegating are well versed in whatever services are being offered. There's a heavy state law component there, and so we have to make sure we keep that in mind. But at the same time, it's a business, and so we have to look at it from an efficiency standpoint, from a logic standpoint, and make sure that that makes sense as well. Other things we look at: where are you going? If you're going intrastate, probably pretty straightforward, as long as your house is in order. We don't want you porting issues to another location, but if we do our due diligence and make sure that first location is in a good spot, it's probably going to be fine in the next spot. The question is, are we crossing state lines? As we all know, healthcare is very much state law driven, and so we have to be really careful. One of the things I always like to cite is Kansas City, because we got Kansas City, Kansas, Kansas City, Missouri. Very, very different laws, even though essentially the difference is a bridge and a river. And so, it's just one of those things we have to be careful of. Same thing with North Carolina and South Carolina. Share a border, share a lot of characteristics, wildly different healthcare laws. And then the third thing we look at when somebody's telling us they want to expand is really, where are you at right now in terms of what your contracts say? We want to look at things like leases and vendor agreements and employment agreements and professional services agreements, and all these things that may have, some sort of restriction or limitation or anything like that. And just make sure that even if all the other pieces are in place, we're not accidentally shooting ourselves in the foot with something that could be otherwise easily avoided by just knowing what your contracts say.
Thank you, Samuel. The interesting thought, I just throw this out. When we were first expanding, one of in looking at different sites, and we of course we had a Canadian law versus American law, and that was interesting, and then the state thing on top of that. But the one of the things that my lawyer said earlier, he said, "How are you going to sell this?" And I thought, I don't know, I wasn't really thinking about selling it yet. But I was so appreciative that he actually asked that question, because we actually designed it so that I would be able to sell it to a US partner, or I could sell it to a Canadian partner. And there was very unique considerations I would never have known if, and so just a shout out to the power of good legal representation. It's the little things that you miss that'll be the big problems when you go to do something like selling the business. So thank you,
Yeah.
Sam.
No, and it's a great point. There's a lot of times when people are telling us about asking us what they need to know at the start, our question is, okay, what is the end? Like, what is your goal? And that can help a lot with structuring as well.
Right. Thank you. Paula, a question for you. Expanding a business requires maintaining core values. Randolph was already in your neighborhood. How did you ensure that the culture remained consistent as you grew the team? And what strategies did you use to develop leadership roles that aligned with your vision?
For me, I think the most important thing when I'm hiring is that you're hiring for culture, morality, people's values, and what they see, the vision they see in aesthetics, because, you know, aesthetics is very subjective. So I like someone knowledgeable, but yet isn't a cowboy. They're gonna always double check, not jump into a new treatment that could be dangerous, you know? There's a lot of gray zones in medicine. We practice off-label stuff. So I don't, you know, most important is safety for my clients and the outcome, because that really is gonna support your brand. So hiring people that you have the similar vision alignment. And then, as Sam had said, I've actually crafted a playbook, like literally that something that could be replicated word for word, everything from the front desk, how people are answering the phones, how we're describing treatments, to the clinical aspect. How are we going to approach safety protocols, any adverse event reactions, things so that we are always aligned as a team. We group together also in meetings, you know, it could be monthly meetings. We might have the providers do a weekly get together where we can talk about any off-label things, new treatments up and coming, go through research articles, share a lot with our peers. But I do think that skills are something that we really train. We train in those meetings, but having, you know, the quality that you are going to bring in, it really, I think, is a personal who you're going to hire into the practice. So I do think that that's the most important. And other than that, I think that giving performance reviews and structuring the way that my providers get paid, and even the employees that are selling the front desk, incentivizing them so that they feel that they're part of the group, that we're all going to see growth together in the practice. Because as Sam had said, yeah, when you start, we are all bootstrapped, and you know, a lot of people want to just see them hit their milestones, and then you just see that it's more rewarding, and you gather people and treat them like a family, and how important that we're all going to grow in this together. And it really empowers people. I think having a happy work culture and growth will come and be aligned with everything.
Yeah, thank you, Paula. As you're talking, I'm thinking Disney, I'm thinking Marriott, I'm thinking cultures that their whole messaging is built around how are we going to unexpectedly delight the customer, and then reverse engineering that back. So how do we, to today, what do we need to do to achieve that? And I love what you're saying, just that's the essence of what you're sharing, but it's not a hard script or a one-time effort. It's inculcated into the culture, and celebrating the wins along the way is what kind of reinforces that. I can imagine that would be part of your culture for sure. I bet you there's some pretty good incentives. I'm just thinking. So, Sam, I've got a question for you, Sameal. Expanding a wellness business often involves significant financial planning. How did you approach funding your growth, refine your cost structures, and ensure that you were managing cash flow effectively to avoid any financial pitfalls along the way? You're muted. Yep.
Yes, there you go. Thank you. So, we always hear people talk about short-term goals and long-term goals, but what does that really mean? And what are you applying those goals to, right? One thing that I'll say is spreadsheets, man. They work in an unbelievable way. When we talk about financial forecasting, putting those pro formas together, and then putting your short-term goals alongside your long-term goals connected to those spreadsheets, right? So you can kind of work with your team of where you want to take your business, especially if you're bootstrapped, right? If you're bootstrapped, you want to make sure you're hitting those specific financial milestones to be able to cover your expenses and whatnot. Now, when it comes to, expenses in your company, you want to manage any potential unnecessary expenses, right? How much inventory do you have at your location? Are you setting up proper inventory management? Do you have an inventory management system in place where you set your certain par levels and you're not having, $50, $60, or $60,000 worth of inventory just sitting on the shelves and not moving, right? You need that money to continue to grow your business. You can't have it just sitting. Another thing that we focused on tremendously when we decided to go multi-location is work with our vendors, right? Enhance the amount of time we have when it comes to terms, so we can utilize our cash flow to continue to grow our business. When we're talking about multi-location business and we're going into a new facility that we have to build out, how are we negotiating with the landlord to get a really good, strong TI allowance that we don't have to come cash out of pocket to build out that new location? So for us, there was a lot of these different things that you have to look at operationally to be able to fund your process and continue to grow without going too deep into the bank.
Thank you, Sam. I just realized, I think I know everybody that's here tonight and listening and watching. I'm just going to, the common denominator, this term bootstrapping, I just want to put that out just because we've been using it a lot. When we think of bootstrapping, it's the idea that the company is operating with very limited resources, whether little, if any, external working capital, very little, if any, external help, strategic partnerships and stuff like that. But it's really the idea of so what you're hearing from Sam and from Randolph and Paul, it's about really doing this from the leanest perspective probably possible and then obviously achieving great success, as we've heard tonight. So I just want to throw that out. Somebody was going to ask that question. Now probably somebody say, I was going to ask that question. Randolph, I got a question for you. And the question is, once you had that first location humming, what specific financial and operational benchmarks told you you're ready to expand versus we need more time to perfect our model? And along with that, what KPIs did you track most closely? Yeah, what did your dashboard look like with that?
So, perfect. I don't think you're ever perfect. You have to make a decision at some point when you're ready to expand. And as we said earlier, that is a lot of times based on making sure your first location is achieving and reaching capacity. I think that, the most telling thing is, are you driving revenue? And top line is important, but then you also want to make sure that you're managing bottom line very, very well. So when we looked at that proof of concept, which is really what you're talking about, is proving out the concept. And when you think about franchising, it's got to be hitting on all cylinders at a level that a franchisee can afford to pay royalties and still make money. So it has to be performing at a very high level. And once we had the proof of concept performing at a high level, we put together some KPIs that could be what we call leading indicators versus trailing indicators. And so a lot of people I've evaluated, I don't know, 40 or more practices for acquisition. And the thing that always intrigued me was how financially unsophisticated many of the potential acquisitions were. And when I say unsophisticated, is that many of them didn't have a P&L even to look at, and they were kind of just running and shooting from the hip. They knew they were making money, but they didn't really know where their money was coming from. They weren't managing their expenses well. So making sure that you are well managed financially, that you're using QuickBooks, that you have your key data points well understood. And so when you think about from a provider perspective, one of the most telling data points is revenue per hour, because revenue per hour encompasses a lot of different data points. If you're an aesthetic injector, yeah, it does encompass dermal fillers and Botox, but it also pulls in retail, and it pulls in, what you're doing from an upsell perspective. Part of that culture is a sales culture, and digging into their service and revenue mix, looking at retail as a percentage of revenue, looking at schedule utilization. How efficient are you with your schedule? And have you developed your team well enough that they're looking forward in your schedules so that they can see opportunities to fill the schedule from future appointments? So for example, if tomorrow you look at your schedule and you see some gaps, and you can make some phone calls and pull some people from the future into tomorrow's appointments, so that tomorrow is booked, and it opens up the future so you can book future people into those appointments. Having a team well trained and understanding how to do that, understanding the importance of rebooking, pre-booking, if you want to call it that. So when someone is walking out, you're booking them ahead. Looking at your net number of new memberships. If you don't have a membership model, I would recommend that you look at a membership model. New clients, your new client conversion rate, the cost per lead, your client acquisition costs, and then somewhat of a P&L indicator is labor as a percentage of revenue, making sure you're managing that tightly, and then looking at your cost of goods and making sure that your team is not overusing products. And one of those that I struggled with the most, and it's probably a service that almost every med spa offers, is hydrofacial. Hydrofacial became one of our most costly services to offer because the team was overusing solution when they were providing a service. And so we had to really focus on training the team on, what a hydrofacial service is and what it encompassed, and making sure that they were staying true to the hydrofacial service. And you might think, well, a client would love having, an extended hydrofacial, right? Yeah, they do. But if one esthetician, if you will, is offering a hydrofacial at a certain level, and another one's offering it at another level, and another one's offering it at another level, and then a client experiences that hydrofacial from 3 different providers, and it's 3 different experiences, it confuses your client about, well, what is the hydrofacial experience? Is it the face and the neck? Is it the face, and beyond? What is it? So we had to make sure that we refined that, and it helped us manage that cost of goods, because if you have a hydrofacial machine, that hydrofacial cost of goods are expensive.
Thank you, Randolph. We've got a couple of questions have come up from Jaso Alex. Jason, or I hope it's Jaso, not Jason, but it says Jaso. Jaso, the first question is his second question. I'm going to put it out to you, Randolph, just because you just brought it up. He was asking, what's a good benchmark for revenue per hour or revenue per hour per employee?
So it depends on the employee and the position that they're in, and what you've done to create that sales culture. So if you have an experienced provider that's an aesthetic injector, a really good one, and Paula could speak to this because she's done it, is able to drive about $1 million in revenue per year into a clinic. And so when you divide that out at their hourly rate and look at their hours worked, they should be able to drive anywhere from $600 to $800 per hour. So when you look at a provider per hour revenue, an esthetician, depending on their experience level and how well they are trained, should be able to drive between, $250 to, I would say, $400 per hour if they're really good. When I say really good, do they offer a microneedling treatment, or are they very good at understanding their client, what their needs are, and are able to take that microneedling treatment and then add on exosomes and take that treatment from let's call it a $200 or so treatment to a $500 treatment. That's how you drive revenue, and you're doing it within the same time frame that you allocated the microneedling treatment.
Makes sense. Thank you, Randolph. There's another question from JSO as well. I'll throw that out maybe to Sam, or actually I'll open it. It's really any or all of you can answer. We just want to manage our time with it. But the question is, how much financial information do you share about your business with your team, those that are not equity owners, especially when incentivized with dollars, and especially when you are trying to scale? Who'd like to throw an answer back on that?
I could throw an answer of what we do. We're very transparent with our team, especially our team leaders. We're sharing everything. We want them to know, our COGS on everything, and, how much loss we have for the month, for the week. We're looking at financials every single day, from the point in time that we open the location to, close. So for me, it's the more information you give the team to understand the financial health of the business, the more success you're going to see.
Yeah. I always I look at something like this. What's at risk to share all the information? What's at risk not to? And really, if you want invested parties that are really pulling to the vision and going the extra mile, then they need to own part of own the understanding where the numbers are. Paula, or did you want to speak to that, or are you?
Yeah, I wouldn't disclose everything with everyone, but definitely each provider disclose very transparent as to what they're making, the growth, where they need to be kind of like upselling, or where they can, help guide them to grow their own practice. We're very transparent within our skincare sales, so we'll make it fun, where we try to have like a benchmark, an incentive. And we used to do it individually as who was going to be the one that would sell the most and then incentivize them. But we found that for culture, it was more fun that if we had it as a group, and if we pooled together and we were able to hit that number in skincare sales, that they would all get something. If it was a $300 gift certificate extra at the end of the month, or something, things like that. Again, mostly because it kind of united the culture.
Okay. Thank you, Paula. And I hope that that's helped, gives you some insight there. And it did for me, that's for sure. Let's go ahead, Samuel. I got a question from you from a legal perspective. How can medical practices approach financial planning and risk mitigation during expansion, particularly when it comes to compliance with healthcare regulations and funding options? You've spoken a bit to the healthcare regulations, but maybe on the funding options.
Yeah, and I mean, they all both, like, the compliance is always built in, right? But I think the primary question there is, how are you funding it? If we're looking at cash reserves, it's a very different perspective than if we're having, equity investment, especially from potential investors or existing partners versus debt. And for cash reserves, pretty straightforward. Do you have the money? What does that look like in terms of your operations and your cash flow? Equity, I think, is a much more fraught question, because one, we have to understand what our internal governance documents say, which I know that sounds obvious, but we would be surprised how often that's not the case. And of course, anytime you have people putting money in, the question becomes, how do we balance the inflow of capital with control and contingency? And anytime, we're talking about contingency and the ownership perspective, we're looking at, protective covenants, transfers, buy, sell, things like that. And we want to make sure, obviously, that with equity funding, that whatever documentation needs to be in place, whatever updates, whatever needs to happen, that occurs prior to any funding, to any, transaction of any sort, so that we have the rules in place, we have the guardrails in place, and it becomes a question of, are you going to be a part of this or not, rather than somebody putting in money and now they have a say in how we update what the rules and guardrails are. Um, Investors are a great way to mitigate personal risk from a financial standpoint, but it also makes the control aspect a lot tougher. On the debt side, compliance is also huge for lending. We see this a lot where people will seek lending from, banks and just traditional financing. And a lot of times the underwriting department will look at compliance factors and say, hey, we don't see, the physician owner or whatever it is. And you really have to walk them through what's going on. We've seen a lot of savviness from the lending side in terms of MSO structures. They've really come a long way in that perspective. So that's been nice. But we do quite often get pushback from the lending institution and have to build in things into the MSA to help them with their, kind of underwriting. SBA, another huge source of funding. There's been a ton of changes recently. So as far as the SBA goes, understanding the changes, understanding the increased requirements in terms of transparency, that's really been a struggle. There's more limitations on what you can use the funding for, which has been a bit of a struggle. And so for people receiving funds, and all of these things are things you have to understand and plan for. Same thing with repayment compliance. We want to talk about a area where compliance really matters. People who may not qualify for traditional funding may seek loans from family members or other business partners or whatever. We have to really drill down into what that looks like and look at the regulatory compliance for lending to what functionally is a medical service. And so, depending on how we've structured things, we can move where the money goes and things like that. But it's very much an ounce of prevention is worth the pound of cure. The other big thing with debt, any sort of guarantees, the whole point of having an entity, of having a structure, is to mitigate personal risk. And anytime we offer a personal guarantee, we're wiping out a part of that mitigation. And so something to think really hard about if you're looking at a debt financing, round of injection of capital is this really worth, going around that limited liability shield? How can we narrow down that guarantee? How can we, lower the timeline or the amounts or whatever it is? The other big thing that we always ask is, what does the expansion look like? And the reason I bring this up is really two things, two ways we see risk mitigation and expansion: space sharing and equipment sharing. And we just have to be really careful when we're looking at things where people will be like, hey, I'm going to expand. I'm going to put my services in a room of this other practice, or, I'm going to sublease space from a totally non-related business. And anytime we get into that, we get right back into the regulatory compliance landscape. Same thing with equipment leasing. We just have to be a little bit careful and plan a bit on the front end, and definitely be respectful of, especially monetary compliance factors, making sure that we're not engaging accidentally in kickbacks, making sure for states that have true fee splitting prohibitions that we're not violating fee splitting prohibitions, and then looking at documentation, making sure we're not violating leases or anything like that.
Thank you, Samuel. And I'm just looking at our time. I've got enough questions that this should really be part one. You guys have really covered. So, and the best part is like the theory and the practice and the elements and there's just a ton of stuff here, but I feel like we haven't even really dug into the best practices to the level of really putting the rubber to the road on what you guys have been sharing. But Our time is coming to a close, and it has been awesome. I'm going to just go ahead and share my screen, and give me a second here. And as you may recall, I promised you what I said is a very interesting gift, and here it is. It's a gift from the founder of the Business of Aesthetics Expert panel webinar. His name is Narain Arulraja, and Narain is also the CEO of Equimarketing. Equimarketing is a digital marketing organization for doctors and medical professionals. Just like our 4 panelists tonight who are experts in their own particular areas of field and expertise, Equimarketing is a digital marketing expert. And as a token of our appreciation of your time and participation, Narain is offering you a free marketing strategy meeting with Lila Stone, who is the Business of Aesthetics and Marketing Director of Equimarketing. Lila has established herself as a trusted expert in digital marketing, and she is passionate about empowering medical professionals with the marketing tools and knowledge to stand out in a obviously very competitive market. You can see on the slide in front of you that she has considerable specializations. And as I said, this is a gift from Narain. And it's really, there's no tricks or hidden agenda. This isn't, never dull steak knives or anything like this. Is simply Narain has real passion for the aesthetics industry, always has invested heavily, and he's an expert in digital marketing. Now, if you already are an expert in digital marketing, this might not be a great thing for you, but if you aren't, this is probably something really important, because what actually is going to happen is when Lila gets a booking, she spends about 6 hours looking at your digital footprint. She looks at everything you're doing, how it's working, what it's not doing. Look at your SEO, look at your Google links, all the elements that come into play into creating a digital footprint, and then comes back to you with an actual report that gives a detail of what's happening and what you could do to make changes. And really, and as I said, there's no hidden agenda there, just simply to help you be the best version of you online, just like we've been talking about with the expanding and scaling of med spas. And as I said before, they're my favorite 2 questions. The first question, whenever I get something like this, the first question I would ask is, what's at risk to do this? Well, your time, and it's super valuable. I appreciate that, but there is no hidden cost. The second question I always ask, what's at risk not to? Well, that's a question you have to answer yourself. And if you're an expert at this, as I said, well, you probably don't need it. If you aren't, I'm recommending you might want to have a look at this. But I'll leave that decision to you, and you can go ahead and scan the code that you can see on the screen and be able to download it, or you can go to the website that is listed there. It'll also be, the website will also be, the link for it will also be in the chat. So you can go ahead and link that there as well. So please take advantage of that. But first of all, thank you to our expert panel, Paula, Sameal, Randolph, and Samuel. You guys were amazing. So much insight, best practices, and actionable content. If I was to sum it up, I'd say you collectively made the complex pretty simple, the hidden very visible, and arguably the difficult easy. Thank you for doing that. And secondly, thank you to all our attendees for the privilege of your time and your participation. Jay, so thank you for the questions. Without you, we don't grow together. And when we don't grow together, we don't set each other up for success. A reminder to like, share, and review us on your favorite social media. We love likes and shares, so should you. And be a part of someone else's success. So on behalf of our panelists, and probably part 1 of part 2, I'm hoping we're going to be able to pick this up and do a second session for you. But until next time, on behalf of our panelists, keep striving for excellence and exceptional patient care. Mike Walker, till next time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.